The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear over the Grantham estate, but inside the grand old house, chaos was the only ruler. It was a beautiful, frantic, expensive kind of chaos. Flowers arrived in avalanches of white and blush pink. Caterers in starched uniforms marched like soldiers, carrying silver trays of delicate, uneaten food. The air smelled of lily, polished wood, and rising anxiety. Through this storm of preparation moved a woman named Alara. She was a quiet figure, easy to miss in her simple black dress and sensible shoes. To the family and their glittering guests, she was part of the background, a piece of the scenery that made events like this run smoothly. She was the Maid. Her real job was with the high-end agency that managed the estate, but for today she was extra hands. She didn't mind. The work was straightforward. See what needs doing and do it. She refilled a water pitcher on a sideboard before it was half empty. She gently guided a lost delivery man towards the kitchen. She picked up a stray champagne flute before it could be knocked over by a swirling guest. The guests were a spectacle unto themselves. They flowed through the grand rooms in waves of silk, tailored suits, and loud, confident laughter. The bride's family was old money, and it showed in their calm, worn in elegance. The groom's side was louder, brighter artists and musicians from the city. The groom himself was a rising star in the world of classical violin, a man with a smile that seemed to draw light towards him, and the bride, Sophia, was the heart of it all. Once she had been a piano prodigy herself, the kind written about in society pages. She had chosen a different path, but music was still the language of her family. That's why the centerpiece of the grand ballroom wasn't just a decoration. It was a statement. Sitting proudly on a raised platform was a Steinway concert grand piano. Its polished ebony surface was like a deep, still pool of night, reflecting the crystal chandeliers above. It was a beautiful, intimidating monster of an instrument. Alara found herself drawn to it. During a rare quiet moment, when the room was empty before the ceremony, she walked over to it. Her cleaning cloth was in her hand, and she began to gently wipe the already spotless lid. But this wasn't just dusting. Her movements were slow, reverent. Her fingers, rough from work, traced the curve of the wood near the manufacturer's nameplate. She didn't open the lid. She didn't need to. She simply stood there for a long moment, her eyes closed, listening to a silence that only she could hear filled with music. A sharp voice cut through her peace. "Excuse me? The seating cards for the terrace are getting mixed up." Alara's eyes opened, and the faraway look in them vanished, replaced by polite attentiveness. "Of course. I'll see to it right away," she said, her voice soft and slightly accented. She gave the piano one last, fleeting glance and moved away, blending back into the stream of staff. The ceremony was a blur of emotion and sunlight in the garden. Alara watched from the kitchen window, a small smile on her face as the couple exchanged vows. She felt a familiar, bittersweet pang, a memory of joy, distant and personal. She shook it off. This was their day, not a time for her old ghosts. After the ceremony, the party flooded into the ballroom for the reception. The noise level tripled. Alara was now in constant motion, a silent gear in a loud, beautiful machine. She cleared used glasses, delivered urgent messages from the planner to the caterer, and helped a flustered bridesmaid fix a broken strap dot as she passed by a group of the groom's fashionable friends. She heard a snippet of conversation. They were staring at the piano, waiting for the musical performance that was part of the schedule. The scheduled pianist was a friend of the groom, a man known for his dramatic flair. "I heard he's going to debut a new piece for them," one woman said. Sipping her drink out, another man, sleek and smiling, nodded. "He's a genius, absolutely unhinged. It'll be spectacular." Their eyes drifted over, as Alara carefully collected an empty plate from a table near them. The man's gaze followed her for a second, not really seeing her, but using her as a point of reference. He gestured vaguely with his champagne flute towards the Steinway. "One wonders," he said, his tone light and careless, "if someone like that even knows what it's for. Probably just sees it as another expensive piece of furniture to dust." His friends laughed, a tinkling, meaningless sound. Alara heard it. She always heard things like that. She didn't react. Her face remained a calm, neutral mask. She simply finished her task and moved towards the kitchen, the laugh fading behind her dot. What they didn't see was the slight, almost imperceptible tightening of her jaw. What they didn't see was the way her fingers, holding the tray of dirty glassware, flexed for a second, as if tracing an invisible scale on its surface. They saw a maid in a uniform. They did not see the woman. Back in the hot, bustling kitchen, the head wedding planner, a woman with a headset and a wild look in her eyes, was ranting. "The pianist! He's nowhere to be found. Someone check the library, check the garden, check his car. He's supposed to be on in 20 minutes. Alara placed her tray down quietly. She washed her hands at the deep sink, the soap scrubbing away not just grime, but the lingering feel of that man's words. She looked out through the service doors into the glittering ballroom. She saw the bride, Sophia, looking radiant, but now with a faint line of worry on her brow as the planner whispered in her ear. She saw the glorious silent piano waiting. A deep, old feeling stirred inside Alara. It wasn't anger at the rude guest. That was just noise. It was something else, a protective feeling maybe. A sadness that such a beautiful instrument, on such a day of love, might be silenced by something as silly as a missing performer. The music should be heard. It needed to be heard. She dried her hands meticulously on a clean towel. She took a slow, deep breath, the kind that had steadied her before very different kinds of performances, a lifetime ago. The chaos of the kitchen swirled around her, but for a moment she was perfectly still. She didn't know what she would do. She only knew that the piano wasn't just furniture, and she was not just a maid. But the gap between those two truths seemed as wide and deep as an ocean. She smoothed down her simple black dress, a uniform that felt suddenly like a disguise, and stepped back into the noise of the party, her quiet eyes fixed on the distant, gleaming shape of the Steinway. The party in the ballroom was hitting its peak. Laughter bubbled over the soft background music coming from the speakers. The air was warm, sweet with the smell of perfume, wine, and rich food. Everyone was having a good time, or at least they looked like they were. The bride and groom moved through the crowd, their hands linked, smiling until their faces looked like they might ache. Alara stayed near the edges. Her tray was gone now, replaced by a small cloth she used to wipe down empty spots on tables. It was just an excuse to be there, to move, to keep her eyes open. She was watching the planner, a woman named Anya, whose smile had started to look tight and thin, like a wire about to snap. Anya kept touching her earpiece and speaking into her headset, her voice a low, urgent hiss. Alara didn't need to hear the words. She could read the crisis in the way Anya's shoulders crept up towards her ears, in the quick, sharp glances she kept throwing towards a door at the back of the ballroom. The problem was the music. The recorded music was fine for now, but it wasn't the plan. The plan was for a grand live performance. The groom was a violinist, a really good one. His best friend, a pianist with wild hair and a reputation for being brilliant and a bit unpredictable, was supposed to play a special piece for the couple's first dance. It was a tradition, a gift, the centerpiece of the whole evening, but the pianist was missing. Alara saw the groom's mother, a tall woman in a severe blue dress, corner Anya near the giant flower arrangement. The older woman's face was calm, but her eyes were hard. Her words were clipped. The music must happen. It is non-negotiable. Find him. Anya nodded, her smile now completely gone. She turned and almost ran towards the kitchen, the door swinging shut behind her. The party swirled on, unaware. But a few people were starting to notice. The groom's artistic friends kept checking their watches, looking towards the piano. The instrument sat there on its platform, quiet and dark, a sleeping giant. A few minutes later, the door to the library burst open. Out stumbled the missing pianist. But he was not ready to perform. His face was flushed, his hair more wild than usual. He leaned heavily on the doorframe, blinking at the bright lights of the ballroom. He wasn't just late. He was in no state to play anything. He had been in the groom's father's study, it seemed, sampling the very expensive whiskey. A low murmur started near him and spread like a ripple. The groom hurried over, putting a friendly arm around his friend, but his smile was strained. He tried to steer the man towards a chair. "Maybe some water, yeah? Coffee?" he said, his voice low. The pianist just waved a hand, his words a bit too loud. "I'm fantastic. Ready for a symphony." But when he tried to stand straight, he wobbled. Anya reappeared, her face white. She saw the pianist, and all the hope drained from her eyes. This was the disaster she had been fearing. You can't replace a concert pianist in 5 minutes. You can't ask a drunk man to play a difficult, emotional piece for his best friend's wedding. From her spot by the pillar, Ilara watched it all unfold. She saw the bride, Sophia, across the room. The young woman's happy glow was fading, replaced by a pale, worried tension. She was looking at her new husband, at his struggling friend, at the silent piano. This moment, this special musical gift, was crumbling right in front of her. It was more than just a skipped song. It was a piece of her story, of their story, falling apart. Something turned over in Ilara's heart. It wasn't a sudden, traumatic feeling. It was quieter than that. It was a memory of other stages, other moments where music was the only thing that mattered. It was a deep, old understanding of what it meant to have a song in your heart for someone, and to have that song silenced. She looked at the piano. It wasn't a thing of polished wood and wires to her. It was a vessel. It was meant to hold the feelings too big for words, the joy, the love, the hope of a day like today. To leave it silent felt like a tragedy. A small, private tragedy in a room full of celebration, but a tragedy all the same. She didn't think about herself. She didn't think about the uniform she wore, or the way people had looked right through her all day. She only thought of the bride's disappointed face and the sleeping giant of an instrument. Her feet began to move before her. Mind had fully caught up. She walked, not towards the kitchen, but across the edge of the dance floor. She weaved between chatting guests, her simple black dress making her almost invisible against the dark wood of the walls. Her heart was a steady, heavy drum in her chest. She approached Anya, who was now pinching the bridge of her nose, looking like she might cry or scream. The planner was surrounded by 2 junior assistants, all talking in panicked whispers. Ilara stopped a few feet away and waited. She didn't push in. She just stood there, patient and still, until Anya's frantic eyes finally landed on her. "What?" Anya snapped, her voice frayed. "What is it?" "We have a crisis here." Ilara took a small breath. Her voice, when it came out, was low. It had that faint, soft accent, but it was clear. It didn't shake. "I can play the piece," she said. For a second, there was no reaction. The words didn't seem to make sense to Anya. She just stared, her brain overloaded. "What did you say?" "The piece for the first dance," Ilara repeated, a little louder. Her eyes flicked towards the piano, then back to Anya. "I know it. I can play it. If you will allow me." The silence that followed was short but thick. Then Anya let out a sharp, humorless laugh. It was a sound of pure stress. You? Don't be absurd. This isn't the time for jokes. She turned back to her assistants. Someone call the agency. See if there's any freelancer who can get here in 20 minutes. One of the assistants, a young man, looked at Ilara with a hint of pity. She's just trying to help, Anya. Help? Anya spun back, her voice a harsh whisper. She's the maid. She cleans. Look at her. Her gesture took in Ilara's simple dress, her sensible shoes, her hands that were clean but showed the marks of a life of work. That is a $60,000 concert instrument. The piece is original and complex. This is not. This is not a children's recital. Ilara didn't flinch. She didn't argue. She just stood there, holding the player's angry gaze. Inside, she felt a strange calm. The hard part was over. She had offered. The rest was not in her hands. But then, another voice joined them. It was softer, but it cut through Anya's panic. What's happening? It was the bride, Sophia. She had glided over, her white dress whispering against the floor. Her face was concerned, her eyes moving from Anya's desperate expression to Ilara's calm. Steady one. Anya sighed, trying to compose herself. It's nothing, my dear. Just a staffing issue. We're sorting it. She said she can play, the young assistant blurted out, then immediately looked like he wished he hadn't. Sophia's eyebrows went up. She looked at Ilara properly, for the first time all day. Not as staff, but as a person. She saw a woman older than her, with kind, tired eyes and a stillness about her. You can play? The arrangement my husband's friend wrote? Ilara nodded once. Yes? You've heard it before? I have heard it today from the speakers during the rehearsal, Ilara said. It was true. She had a way with music, a way of hearing something once and understanding its bones, its heart. I know it. Anya threw her hands up. Sophia, please. This is impossible. We'll find another solution. We'll push the dance back. No, Sophia said quietly. Her voice was firm. She was looking at Ilara, and something in the older woman's quiet certainty was speaking to her. Maybe it was the memory of her own years at the piano, the respect for anyone who approached an instrument with seriousness. Maybe she was just tired of the panic and wanted a simple, brave solution. We have a room full of people. The schedule is tight. She paused, then made a decision. A kind one. Let her try. Anya looked like she'd been slapped. Sophia, what other choice do we have right now? Sophia asked, her tone gentle but final. She gave Ilara a small, encouraging smile. It was a smile that said, Asterisk, I see you. I'm trusting you. Asterisk the permission, reluctant and disbelieving from Anya, granted with curious hope from the bride, settled over the group. Anya, defeated and out of time, just shook her head. Fine. But if this goes wrong, it's... She didn't finish. She just pointed a trembling finger towards the piano. Go. Just go. Ilara gave a small, almost imperceptible nod to Sophia, a silent thank you. Then she turned. She began to walk towards the raised platform where the Steinway waited. The journey across the ballroom floor felt very long. Chatter and laughter still filled the air. A few people noticed the maid walking with purpose towards the expensive piano. They nudged each other. They thought she was going to adjust a microphone, or maybe clean a smudge off the fallboard. Someone even chuckled, assuming it was part of some comedic bit. Ilara heard none of it. Her world had shrunk to the path in front of her, and the beautiful, dark shape of the piano at the end of it. Her heart was steady. Her hands, hanging at her sides, were perfectly still. She reached the steps to the platform. She climbed them. She stood before the Steinway for a moment, just looking at it. She was not seeing a piece of furniture. She was seeing an old friend, a demanding partner, a doorway to a world she had closed long ago. She placed a hand lightly on its cool, polished lid. Then she sat down on the bench. The adjustment was small but total. Her spine straightened. Her shoulders, usually rounded from work, settled back. She was no longer trying to be small, to be unseen. She ran her fingers along the edge of the keys, not pressing them, just feeling the cool ivory and ebony. A final loud whisper carried from a nearby table. It was the same sleek man from before. What on earth is she doing? Someone should stop her. But no one did. Alara took a deep, slow breath, filling her lungs. She lifted her hands, and in that moment, the maid was gone. Who was left on the bench, no one in the room yet knew. The moment her fingers touched the keys, the world in the ballroom shifted. It wasn't a loud shift. It was a deep, quiet one, like the turning of a great wheel. The first sound she made wasn't a delicate tinkling or a hesitant note. Alara pressed a single chord, a rich, complex cluster of notes from the lower register. The sound was not loud, but it was full. It was a sound with weight and history. It rolled out from the piano, a warm, resonant wave that cut through the chatter and reached into the chest of every person standing nearby. The conversation at the table closest to the platform died in the middle of a sentence. A woman with a wine glass paused, the glass halfway to her lips, her head tilting. The sound was so unexpected, so utterly confident, that it commanded attention without asking for it. Then Ilara began to play in earnest. The piece was the one written for the bride and groom. It started with a gentle, flowing melody in the right hand, meant to sound like a love song. The missing pianist had written it to be pretty and clever, with little flourishes to show off his skill. But in Ilara's hands, it became something else entirely. She played the notes as written, yes, but she didn't just play the notes. She played the space between the notes. She played the silence that held them. Her left hand didn't just provide chords. It built a foundation, deep and resonant, like the earth beneath a growing tree. A melody from her right hand wasn't just pretty. It sang, it wept, it hoped. Her body, usually so still and contained, was now part of the music. There was no wild, theatrical movement. Instead, there was a profound connection. Her shoulders moved with the phrases, her head giving a slight, unconscious tilt as she listened to the harmonies she was creating. Her face, which had been a mask of polite neutrality all day, was alive. Her eyes were focused on some distant point, seeing the music, feeling its story. A faint, sad, beautiful smile touched her lips at a particularly tender turn in the melody. The change in the room was absolute. Within 10 seconds, all conversation had stopped. The clinking of glasses ceased. The waiters near the kitchen doors froze, trays in hand, staring. The only sound was the piano. The bride, Sophia, stood perfectly still. Her hand had flown to her mouth. Her eyes were wide, filling with tears that didn't fall. She knew this piece. She had heard her friend play it in practice. It had been a technical showpiece, a gift. But now, hearing it like this, it was as if Ilara had peeled away a shiny, clever surface to reveal the raw, beating heart underneath. She was playing the love, the vulnerability, the promise that Sophia herself felt in her chest. It was her own wedding song, but for the first time, she was truly hearing it. The groom was staring, his arm around his drunken friend forgotten. The friend, the missing pianist, was now sobering up fast, his bleary eyes wide with shock. He was a professional. He could hear things others couldn't. He could hear the flawless technique, the controlled power, the delicate touch, the voicing of the chords that made each inner melody ring clear. But more than that, he could hear the understanding. This woman wasn't just performing. She was interpreting his music on a level he himself had not reached. His face was pale, all arrogance gone, replaced by something like awe. The groom's mother, the severe woman in blue, had lost her look of stern impatience. Her posture had softened. She was listening, her head bowed slightly, as if in prayer. At the back, the planner, Anya, leaned against the doorframe for support. Her hand was still over her mouth, but now it was to stifle a gasp. Her eyes were huge, seeing the woman she had dismissed as just the maid transformed into this artist, this master. Elara was unaware of it all. She was gone. She was in a world of her own making. The ballroom, the people, the wedding, it had all faded into a blur. She was in a practice room at the conservatory, the light fading through a high window. She was on a stage before a hushed audience. She was at her own small piano in a quiet apartment, playing for no one but the walls and her own lonely heart. The music swelled. She reached a section that was written to be fast and flashy, a cascade of notes meant to impress. Elara played it with breathtaking speed and clarity, every note a sparkling drop of water in a fountain. But she didn't play it to show off. She played it as an outburst of pure, unfiltered joy. It was the joy of the day, the joy of finding music waiting for you after so long, the joy that still existed in the world, despite everything. Then she brought it back down. The music softened, becoming a tender conversation, a gentle rocking. Her fingers moved over the keys with a feather-like touch, drawing out sighs from the strings inside the great piano. You could have heard a pin drop in the ballroom. 100 people were holding their breath together. For Elara, memories pressed in. She wasn't just playing the couple's song anymore. She was playing her own life. The triumphant passages were her early successes, the bright future. The melancholy chords were the loss, the hardship, the years of quiet work and silent sacrifice. The gentle, persistent melody underneath it all was the love for her family, the reason for every choice. It was all in there, woven into the notes. She wasn't performing for them. She was finally, after so many years, speaking her truth. And her truth was in this language of sound. As she approached the final measures, the music became a single, clear line of melody, simple and pure, supported by the softest, warmest chords. It was a lullaby. It was a blessing. It was a farewell and a beginning all at once. She played the last note. A single, high, clear tone that hung in the air, shimmering. She held the pedal, letting the sound fade slowly, naturally, into a silence that was deeper than any that had come before. Her hands lowered gently into her lap. She sat there for a moment, her head bowed, her eyes closed. The woman who had been playing was receding, and the woman in the black dress was returning. The connection was breaking. She took a slow, shaky breath, coming back to the room, back to herself. The silence lasted for 3 full seconds. It was a thick, profound, respectful silence. No one wanted to be the first to break the spell. Then it erupted. The applause didn't start with a clap. It started with a collective release of breath, 100 people remembering to breathe at once. And then the sound hit. It wasn't polite, wedding applause. It was a thunderous, roaring, standing ovation. People surged to their feet, their faces alight with wonder, with shock, with emotion. There were shouts of bravo. Tears streamed down the faces of strangers. The groom's pianist friend was clapping so hard his hands must have hurt, his face a picture of stunned respect. Elara flinched just a little at the sudden explosion of noise. She looked out at the crowd, blinking as if surprised to find them there. A faint blush colored her cheeks. This was not what she had wanted. She hadn't wanted applause. She had just wanted the music to be heard. She had wanted to fix the broken moment for the young bride. She stood up from the bench, her movements small and humble again. She gave a quick, awkward, almost shy nod of her head towards the crowd. It was not the bow of a performer, but the acknowledgement of a person who had been overheard. Then she turned and stepped carefully down from the platform. She didn't look at anyone. She just started walking, aiming for the side of the room, for the kitchen doors, for the shadows where she belonged. The crowd's applause followed her, waves of sound washing against her back. People reached out as she passed, wanting to touch her arm, to say something, but she kept her eyes down, moving with a quiet urgency. She just wanted to get back to the sink, back to the trays, back to being invisible. The performance was over. The miracle, as everyone else saw it, was done. For her, it had just been a few minutes of painful, beautiful honesty. And now she needed to disappear. The applause was a physical thing, a wall of sound that followed Ilara as she walked. It felt hot on the back of her neck. She kept her eyes fixed on the swinging kitchen door at the far end of the room, a sanctuary. The faces she passed were a blur of open mouths, shining eyes, outstretched hands. Someone said, "Incredible." Another breathed, "Who is she?" The words buzzed around her like insects. She didn't hear them as praise. She heard them as noise, as a demand for an explanation she did not want to give. For a few minutes, she had let a secret self out into the light. Now, that self needed to be folded away, hidden safely back inside the woman in the black dress. She pushed through the kitchen door, and the world changed again. The roar of the applause became muffled. The air was steamy and smelled of garlic and dish soap. The staff, who had been buzzing with their own crisis minutes before, had fallen silent. They were all staring at her, the cooks, the dishwashers, the young servers. Their faces held a mix of shock, curiosity, and a new strange respect. Ilara ignored them. She went straight to the deep stainless steel sink. Her hands were trembling, just a little. She needed to do something normal, something real. She turned on the hot water, watched it steam, and picked up a scrubbing brush from a bucket. There was a stack of used serving platters waiting. She took the first one, a large silver tray smeared with gravy and bits of food. She plunged it into the hot, soapy water and began to scrub. The coarse bristles against the metal, the heat on her skin, it was familiar. It was grounding. This was her reality. The piano, the music, the staring crowd. That was the dream, or maybe the ghost. This, the soapy water, the simple task, this was real. She scrubbed it harder, focusing on a stubborn spot. The memory of the music was still vibrating in her bones, a sweet and painful echo. She could still feel the cool ivory under her fingertips, the way the piano had answered her touch, alive and responsive. A tear, hot and sudden, escaped and rolled down her cheek, disappearing into the steam rising from the sink. It wasn't a tear of sadness, exactly. It was more like a release of a pressure that had been building for 10, 15 years. Back in the ballroom, the spell was slow to break. People were still on their feet, talking over each other. All conversation now centered on the mysterious woman who had vanished. The bride, Sophia, wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She wasn't looking at her new husband or her guests. She was looking at the empty piano bench, then at the kitchen door that had swung shut. A feeling was growing in her, stronger than curiosity. It was a sense of debt, and of a story desperately needing to be heard. She took her husband's hand. "I have to talk to her," she said, her voice thick with emotion. He nodded, squeezing her hand. "We both do." They excused themselves from a crowd of well-wishers and made their way across the room. The planner, Anya, intercepted them, her face completely transformed. The panic was gone, replaced by a dazed wonder. Sophia, I had no idea. I'm so sorry for what I said. It's okay, Sophia said gently, but her focus was elsewhere. Where did she go? Anya gestured helplessly toward the kitchen. In there. Sophia didn't hesitate. She pushed through the same door, her wedding dress rustling. The kitchen staff, seeing the bride herself enter their domain, stiffened. But Sophia's eyes swept past them and landed on the figure at the sink. There was Ilara, her back to the room, shoulders moving as she scrubbed the already clean platter with a fierce concentration. She looked small again, ordinary. The magical figure from the piano was gone. Sophia approached slowly, as one might approach a skittish animal. She stopped a few feet away. The kitchen had gone utterly quiet, everyone pretending not to watch. Excuse me? Alara's shoulders tensed. She didn't turn around. She kept scrubbing. Please, Sophia said, her voice soft. Please, look at me. Slowly, Ilara turned off the water. She placed the brush down carefully. She dried her hands on a nearby towel, taking her time, then turned around. Her face was composed again, polite and blank, but her eyes were red-rimmed. Yes, ma'am? Is there something you need? More champagne for the guests? Her voice was that same soft, accented whisper from before Sophia felt a lump in her throat. The contrast was heartbreaking. No, she said, shaking her head. No more champagne. She took a step closer. That, what you just did? It was the most beautiful gift anyone has ever given me. Given us. Ilara looked down at her own hands, now clean but wrinkled from the hot water. It was just a piece of music. I am glad it was suitable. It wasn't just music, the groom said, speaking from behind his wife. He had followed her in. It was. I've played with world-class musicians. What you did, it had a soul. You gave our song a soul. Ilara didn't know what to say to that. A simple thank you felt wrong. She just gave another small nod. Sophia couldn't let it go. The question was burning in her chest. Who are you? It wasn't asked with demand, but with a deep, genuine yearning to understand. Please, tell me, how? How can you play like that and be here? For a long moment, Ilara was silent. She looked from the young bride's earnest, tear-streaked face to the groom's respectful one. She saw the entire kitchen staff, frozen, listening. She saw the planner, Anya, hovering in the doorway, her expression one of shame and awe. The walls she had built so high and so strong around her life felt thin in that moment. These people, especially this kind young woman on her wedding day, had shared a vulnerable moment with her through the music. Maybe she thought she owed a small piece of the truth in return. She leaned back against the sink, as if for support. Her gaze drifted to a spot on the floor. A long time ago, she began, her voice so quiet they all had to strain to hear, in another country. Music was my life, since I was a small child. The piano? It was my voice. She spoke in simple, halting sentences. I studied. I won competitions. There was a scholarship to a school. Here, in this country. A big opportunity. She paused, swallowing hard. The memory was a physical pain. Then my mother became very sick. And my younger brother, he was just a boy. There was no one else. The scholarship was for study, not for life. It could not pay for medicine, for a home. She looked up, her eyes meeting Sophia's. So, I chose family. I came here on a different kind of visa. To work. The only work I could get that was steady, that paid enough to send money home. Was this work? She gestured vaguely at the kitchen, at her uniform, the piano. It became a private thing. A thing for very late at night, or for an empty church sometimes. A memory. She gave a tiny, helpless shrug. It is easier, sometimes, to have a job where people do not look at you, where they do not expect anything. You are just a woman who cleans, who serves. It is simple. The heart can be quiet. The kitchen was so silent, you could hear the hum of the refrigerator. A young dishwasher had tears in his eyes. Anya looked like she might be sick with regret. Sophia reached out and took Alara's hand. Alara flinched at first, the touch unexpected. But she didn't pull away. Sophia's hand was soft. Alara's was rough, the skin worn. You played today, Sophia whispered. Your heart was not quiet. It was loud and brave, and it saved our wedding. Alara finally smiled then, a real one, small and sad. You have a kind heart. You let me play. That was a brave thing, too. What is your name? The groom asked gently. Alara. Alara, Sophia repeated, as if tasting the name. Your family. Your mother? She passed some years ago, Alara said, the old grief a familiar shadow in her eyes. My brother is grown now. He is well. He is a teacher. A flash of pure pride broke through her sadness. He is a good man. Sophia squeezed her hand. And you are here, scrubbing a platter. It is an honest platter, Alara said, and a faint, almost teasing light came into her eyes. It was the first glimpse of a personality beyond the pain, and the polished Sophia laughed, a wet, choked sound. She looked at her husband, then back at Alara. A resolve solidified in her. This was not going to be a moment of pity, a tip from a grateful bride. This felt like the crossing of a path for both of them. Alara, Sophia said, her voice firm now. The party is still going. But when it is over, will you sit with me? Just for a little while? I want to hear you play something else. Not for everyone. Just for me. I want to hear the music that is your voice. Alara stared at her. For years, she had been asked for many things, to clean a spill, to fetch a coat, to work an extra hour. No one had asked for her music, for herself, like this. Not in a very, very long time. She looked at her hands again, then back at the kind, persistent face of the bride. The wall around her heart didn't crumble, but a gate in it opened, just a crack. She gave one last, slow nod. For a little while, she whispered. Yes, the wedding party lasted long into the night, but the heart of it had already happened. After the last dance, after the final farewells, the grand house began to settle into a tired, happy quiet. Staff cleared the final glasses. The twinkling lights in the garden seemed to blink sleepily dot in the ballroom, now empty of guests. Only a few people remained. The cleaning crew worked softly in the corners. And on the raised platform, the piano was not dark and silent. A single soft spotlight was left on above it. Sophia had changed out of her wedding gown into a simple silk dress. She sat on the edge of the platform, her shoes off, her feet tucked under her. Her new husband sat in a chair nearby, listening, a contented smile on his face. The planner, Anya, had not gone home. She sat farther back, as if she needed to witness this, to properly understand what she had almost prevented. And Alara played. This was not the performance from before. There was no crowd, no pressure, no piece of music she had to learn. This was a conversation. Sophia had asked, "Will you play what you love? Just for you?" At first, Alara played simple things. Folk tunes from her homeland, melodies that sounded like wind over hills, and stories told by a fire. They were sad and sweet, full of longing for a place that existed now only in memory. Her touch was lighter, more intimate. The piano responded like an old friend sharing secrets. Sophia listened, her chin resting on her knees. She didn't speak. She just absorbed the sound, the story in it, After a while, the music changed. Elara began to play a classical piece. It was complex, with powerful, thundering passages in the bass and delicate, racing lines in the high notes. It was music that demanded everything: technique, heart, strength. Elara gave it all. Here, in the empty room, she allowed herself to fully feel the might of the instrument, the passion of the composer. It was a cry of something of lost dreams, perhaps, but also of a spirit that had never truly broken. When the last powerful chord faded, Sophia let out a soft breath. "That was? You should be heard," she said, her voice full of conviction. Elara's hands rested on the keys. She didn't turn around. "I was heard tonight. That is more than enough." "It's not," Sophia said gently, but firmly. She was a woman who knew what she wanted. "It's a beginning, not an end." In the weeks that followed, life for Elara returned, in many ways, to normal. She went back to her job with the agency, cleaning other grand houses, organizing other parties. But something was different. A thread had been woven that day, a connection that would not snap. Sophia, true to her word, did not let the moment become just a beautiful wedding story. She called Elara, not to offer charity, which she knew would be refused, but to ask for advice. She was helping to organize a small charity concert for a music school. She was stuck on the program. Could Elara look at it? Elara, hesitant at first, agreed. They met for tea in Sophia's sunny new apartment. It was not a meeting between a society bride and a maid. It was two people who spoke the same language, the language of music, sitting at a kitchen table. Elara made suggestions, her knowledge deep and instinctive. Sophia listened, her respect growing. "You should be the one playing in this concert," Sophia said finally, putting the program down. Elara shook her head, a familiar stubborn look in her eyes. "That world, it is not for me anymore. It is for young people, like you were." "That world is for anyone who has something to say," Sophia countered. "And you do." I heard it. It became a gentle, persistent push. Sophia didn't ask for a big concert. She asked for small things. A local community center needed someone to play for an afternoon recital for seniors. The pianist had fallen ill. It was just for an hour, for people who would simply enjoy the music. Would Elara help? It was hard to say no to something so small, so humble. Elara agreed. The recital was in a simple room with fluorescent lights and a slightly out-of-tune upright piano. But the people who came listened with their whole hearts. They clapped after each piece with genuine joy. They didn't see a former prodigy or a mysterious maid. They saw a woman playing beautiful music for them. And for the first time in decades, Elara played for an audience without a wall of fear or sadness around her. She played simply to give them a pleasant afternoon. The feeling was light. It was good. Sophia came to that recital. She sat in the back and watched the small smiles on the faces of the elderly listeners, and the calm, peaceful expression on Elara's face as she took their thanks. Afterward, over tea again, Sophia had another idea. "My old piano teacher runs a small academy. She works with gifted children who don't have much money. She is looking for someone to help part-time, not to clean the studios, to teach, to listen, to guide. The pay is not much, but it is honest work. It is work that matters." This offer was different. It wasn't a performance. It was passing the gift on. It was using her knowledge, her ear, her hard-won understanding, to help a child who might be standing at a crossroads she knew all too well. Elara was silent for a long time, staring into her tea. "I could." "Try," she said finally. That try became a new chapter. One afternoon a week, Elara went to the small, bustling academy. She didn't have a fancy title. She was an assistant instructor. At first, the children, mostly teenagers, saw an older, quiet woman and didn't know what to make of her. But then she would sit next to a frustrated student struggling with a difficult passage. She wouldn't just tell them what was wrong. She would tell them a story. "This part here," she'd say, her finger pointing to the sheet music. "It is not just notes. It is like someone trying to say something very important, but they are whispering because they are shy. You must play the shyness, but also the importance. Let me show you." And then she would play it, not with flashy technique to show off, but with such clear emotion that the meaning became obvious. The students' eyes would widen. They'd try again, and suddenly the music would come alive. Word spread among the students. They started calling her the maestra behind her back, with affection and awe. She had a way of hearing not just their mistakes, but their fear, their excitement, their personality trying to come out through the keys. One day, almost a year after the wedding, Sophia visited the academy. She stood outside a practice room door and listened. Inside, Elara was working with a shy, talented girl on a competition piece. Elara's voice was patient, kind, but firm. "Again," Elara said. "And this time, do not play for the judges. Play for your grandmother, who you told me loves this melody. Play it so she can hear it all the way in her home. Make it a gift." The girl played again. The difference was night and day. The notes were the same, but now they had a purpose, a love behind them. Sophia smiled, her eyes misting. She didn't go in. Later, she met Elara as she was packing her bag to leave. "I heard you teaching," Sophia said. Elara looked up, a soft, tired smile on her face. "She is a good girl. She will do well." "You are doing well," Sophia said. She looked around the modest hallway, buzzing with the sounds of scales and young laughter. "This is where you belong. Not hidden away, not just in service, but here, in the middle of the music." Elara zipped her bag closed. She looked at Sophia, this young woman who had stubbornly refused to let her disappear. "You gave me a key," Elara said quietly. "That night at the wedding. You asked me to play for me. You reminded me that the music was still mine to give. And you are giving it," Sophia said, "in the best way possible." Elara walked home that evening, the sounds of the city a distant hum. She thought of the wedding day, the sneering guest, the panic, the feel of the Steinway's keys under her fingers for the first time in years, the roar of the crowd. It felt like a story about someone else now, a distant dream. Her real life was here, in the small apartment she shared with her brother when he visited, in the letters she still sent back home, in the one afternoon a week where she sat in a sunlit room and helped a child find their voice in the music. She was not a star. She was not a maid. She was Elara, a woman with a story etched in her hands, a song finally shared, and a quiet, purposeful life where her gift, once buried, now had a place to grow and to give. The piano had stunned a wedding, but it was the slow, patient sharing that truly changed a life. Her own.